Hello, 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 everyone. It's Dr. Sabrina Rojek and Dr. Jenny with Kiss and Tell. We have a fabulous guest today. We're super excited. Before we introduce her, and she's, of course, going to let us know a little bit more about herself, we're going to take care of the business side of things real quick. With Kiss and Tell, we've got a lot of upcoming features. We've got some new events that are about to happen. And so we're going to share a little bit more about that in just a moment. And let's get to our guest.
Mhm.
Today we have Andrea Bertoli with us. She's a pleasure coach and a sex educator. She's worked out of Honolulu in Hawaii. I know that. I'm not sure exactly where you're at yet. You'll let us know. But I saw that you do a lot with intimate communication, which I'm really excited to ask about and hear more about expressing desire. I know this is a thing. And I saw that there's urban tantra, so I'm definitely wanting to hear a little bit more about that and what that practice looks for you. But if you want to let us know a little bit more about you, Andrea, if there's anything in particular that's your passion project right now or that is really up for you, if you would let us know that about you. And
Excellent.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenny, Dr. Sabrina, and to Kiss and Tell. And hello to everyone. I'm Andrea. As Dr. Sabrina said, I am a pleasure coach and sex educator. I have been based in Honolulu for about more than 20 years. Currently, I'm in San Francisco, so you may hear the ding of the ferry building just outside my window.
Yes.
And I have been doing this work for a few years now. It is my own work. And I think that that's so powerful to remind people. And that's what I like about Kiss and Tell as well, is that it's not just, I'm not just an expert coming in and talking to people. Like, this is my work as well. And I found you folks through the Cliteracy Conference. I've
Yay.
followed Dr. Lori Mintz for many years, of course, as an
She's
expert
fabulous.
in this field as well. And I loved the conference and hearing from Dr. Marty and hearing from both of you. So happy to
Thank
be
you so
here.
much for joining us
Yeah, thank
here
you.
Yeah.
and today.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you. For
Mhm.
sure. Well, Andrea, if we can just jump right in, I'm super curious. And you said this is my own work. And I love that you started with that. We've kind of changed even our trajectory for Kiss and Tell on how we've gone to school, we've gone to classes, and
Mhm.
there's conversations happening in those places that aren't happening out here where they need to happen. And
Mhm.
so what we're realizing is we're trying to kind of bridge that and start sharing more of what those conversations are that we know other people also need. So when you say my work, what does that mean to you? Why is this so personal? Why is this your path?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to me, sexual wellness is holistic wellness, right? So my background is actually in food. I used to teach
I
cooking
saw.
classes and
And
I
fermented
loved,
food and all of this,
yes,
yes?
I loved doing this. So I've been a
I'm gonna
vegetarian.
geek out on it. Go.
Yeah, so I've been a vegetarian since I was a little kid. I've always been passionate about food, and I was a food blogger and a food policy blogger, and then also was teaching classes for a long time. And the people that I was working with were really learning how to nourish themselves, often for the first
Mm,
time. And it was often women in their 40s or 50s or later, really learning, like, how do I learn to do this in a way that was
mm,
deeply nourishing? And as I did this work more and more, and I had a couple of day jobs on the side across like sales and marketing and things like that, it was also my own work to heal myself with food and supplements and herbs and all of that. And I started getting really into the sexual wellness aspect of it. I really
mm,
asked myself, like, is there more to sex and pleasure? I
Mhm.
came out of an emotionally abusive relationship that went on for much longer than it should have. Coming out of that, I actually got into a lot of money work and
mm,
really
mm.
realizing that like food and money and sex, like these are all intertwined
Oh, yeah.
energetically and also in this way that's like we're supposed to just know what to do, but we don't really have a lot of good information about
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
how.
Yes.
Yeah, so really like working on the money stuff really is not really
Mm.
about money, it's really about self-worth. It's really about value. And as I started to
Yes.
do that, I also started getting interested in like, well, what else is there around sex that I'm missing out on or that I'd like to explore? I really consider myself a lifelong learner and that I always want to read new things and listen to new podcasts and keep trying new stuff.
Yes.
And
Seeker. I call it a seeker.
yeah, I'm definitely that seeker.
Mhm.
And, as most magical transformations do, it was just a friend who was like, I have this book, like, you might like this.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
it was, I'm not going to say the book name because it's actually not great, but it was a
Oh,
book of, tantric ideas for men.
was
Uh,
it good?
at the time, it was very illuminating
Okay.
and really gave me a sense of like, oh, like, okay, like there's more
There's something
here.
else out here besides what you might have been taught.
Yeah, for sure. But as I reread it years later, I was like, oh, this is really problematic, right? So
Okay. Okay. Yep.
we can get into more of that too, but like
For sure.
really heteronormative and often really based in cisgendered,
Yes.
stereotypical relational dynamics. So there's some
Yes.
challenges in that as well.
Yes. Sure.
But that kind of set
But at
me
the time, it's what you needed or was the step, right? Like there's
right,
graduated steps in learning. And it's like, well, until we get to that understanding that it was problematic, it was what I needed at the time in
for
the
sure.
language I understood, to get me to that other place of knowing.
Yeah.
So it does have value for sure. No, I love this. So definitely quite the journey. And what I think is super interesting, is the dots in the way that they connect food and then money, and relationship, right? Food and relationship go way hand in hand for a
For
lot of
sure.
people, right? How you approach
Yep.
food is how they
Yes.
seem to approach relationships as well.
Yes.
um, and so food, relationship, money, sex, and then money, more into sex as spirituality, and just kind of like the path of how it's similar for a lot of people though, and it seems interesting, or that it would be that way, I think. And so I love the connecting of the dots for your path. I want to ask a bit then on how has that pathway informed your work and how you're working with others.
Mm-hmm. I really want to meet people where they're at, right? I understand that not everybody is familiar with a lot of the stuff that I talk about. I understand that people don't have clinical or therapeutic or master's degree backgrounds in sexology or relational dynamics or therapy. So I like to integrate a lot of different resources into my work. So that includes
Mhm.
like I will, when I work with clients, for example, I'll say, here's an Instagram story that I watched that I thought was really helpful, but also here's this book recommendation and here's this
Mhm.
podcast recommendation. And then also
Mhm.
let's sit together and talk about how this works for you, right?
Yes.
Like anything, there are so, like you were saying, there's so many steps to learning it. And and this is what I said in the beginning too. It's like, yeah, I'm an expert in this. And also like I also started, 5, 10 years ago, like not understanding some of the books that I read and not understanding some
Oh,
of the
for
concepts
sure.
I heard in podcasts.
Oh, for sure.
Now I've gotten to where I'm like, oh, like I understand that now, or I've
Yes.
experienced that. And so I like to say, wherever you are on your pleasure journey, I am here to greet you, right? Whether you are very new and you've never, I'm sure you both have come across this as well. Like, I've never talked about sex before. Like, I don't know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
I've
Yeah.
How
never
to
had an
do it.
orgasm.
Yes. Like I don't even.
Right.
Yes.
So sometimes it really is like meeting people exactly where they're at. Like, okay,
Right.
great,
Yes.
you've never had an orgasm. Okay, great, you're rediscovering your sexuality at 40.
Right.
Great,
Yes.
like talk about what that means to you in this moment. So
Yep.
I don't have when I work with especially with my individual and couple clients, I don't say like, we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things
Right.
and then boom, you're on your way. It's like, let's have a conversation about what's coming up. And for example, I had a client a couple of weeks ago say, I'm having challenges with this one specific thing in the bedroom. And I said, great, we can talk about that. And then when we got on the phone, when we got on the call, he said, well, actually, there's all this other emotional stuff coming up.
I was gonna say it had nothing to do with that, did it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it, but it was
Yep.
maybe like
Barely.
10 minutes of
Yeah.
an hour and a half long call because
Right.
so
Yes.
much of it was really about safety, intimacy, security, honesty,
Yes.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
We are
Yes.
vulnerable and open, then we
Right.
build that intimacy from which sexual expression can really flourish.
Yes. You
Yeah.
literally segued perfectly
Yeah.
into.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, because talking, communication is huge. And even when you made the comment, I don't know how to talk about sex, you whispered it. Why did you whisper it? Breaking that stigma would help tremendously.
Yeah.
What? I mean, my hairdresser did it to me a month ago. I'm,
Right.
I'm like, why are you whispering?
We
You
are
know,
grown ass people.
I
Yeah,
know.
we are literally adults.
Well, you're a parent, so I know you had that. I
Mm.
mean, it's just silly. I mean, everybody's here because of sex. That's why you're alive. So we should be thinking instead of whispering about it, you know? So it's really odd to me how it's come that way. It's still happening in 2024, the whispering. So how do you help people with that?
You know, one of the things that happens a lot is, so I use Instagram a lot. That's one of my primary kind of, outreach sources. I'm on TikTok, but like kind of reluctantly. Um, and one of the things that I notice is that I have a lot of followers, but I don't get a lot of engagement. And part of that is, I'm sure you folks are well aware of, is the censorship and the algorithm and the shadow
Oh
banning.
yeah, yeah,
So I also have to change my words, and I'm sure you folks do too.
Play the game.
But one of the things that happens is people that I know that are following me but don't engage will come up to me a month or 6 months after they see something. Oh my God, that thing that you posted like literally changed my sex life. Like I so differently
Mm.
understand how this works in my body. Or, someone that I've known for years literally just reached out and bought my online course because she is taking her own little deep dive, or her own little, just dipping her toe in. She's not ready for the deep dive. She's ready to just do those small things. So it's yes, like I don't want to whisper it. And
mm,
yet sometimes we have to, because again, if we talk about meeting people exactly where they're at, like I always tell my clients when I get on the phone with them, like, thank you for being here. And I do not underestimate how hard it is to talk to a near stranger or a total stranger
Yes.
about the things that you've never said out loud,
mm,
right?
right.
Whether it's about your sexuality or a certain sex act or activity that you like or want to explore, or whether it's about this thing that happens in your relationship. So much of the challenges that my couples have, whether they're straight or queer or in their 20s or in their 60s, like the overlap really comes down to a miscommunication or a lack of communication, because we just are never given the skills to talk about these.
Mhm.
You're right. Oh,
You segued perfectly, Andrea, into what I some of those skills. And so some of what you were saying earlier about what the gentleman he was expressing, or they were expressing, about safety and, like the security, it was these other things, like it was a presenting of maybe I can't, or maybe I'm having a hard time with this, or performance or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden we hear about all this other stuff. And so what are some of those skills? What are some of the things in the meeting people where they're at that you do find yourself, though, repeating? That there are things that, regardless of even what level I want to say, or somebody's knowledge level, or whatever, that there's still things that I tend to repeat. Um, and so some of those are skills. Most of the time, it's information that it all by itself could be life changing, on its own. If Could you share some of what those might be that you're seeing repetitively, or what some of those skills are, what some of these basics that our listeners and our audience could begin to maybe identify for themselves, or use
Yeah.
for themselves?
Yeah, great question. And you're right. I do repeat these a lot because they're so foundational. So
Yes.
I want
Yes.
to say three, and if my brain is working properly, I'll be
Yes.
able to narrate all three. But the first one is really understanding that there are two types of desire, and one is
Mm,
spontaneous, right? The
mm,
spontaneous
I'm
desire is
excited
what we see
already about
most
this.
of
Can't
us
wait.
in movies and rom-coms. It's like
mm,
some people would describe it as like a bolt of lightning, like, oh, it just hits me, or like, boom, I'm horny, I don't know what to do, or I know what I want to do, or
Right.
the
Exactly.
person across the room and I'm like, boom, I'm ready.
Yes.
Awesome. If that is you, like that is normal and that is awesome. A lot of other people, and myself included, have what's considered responsive desire, which means we
mm,
need something to respond to. So it's not going to hit like a bolt of lightning. I like to think of it really as like a flower opening, right? You cannot
Yes.
force a rosebud
Blooming.
or a peony
Yeah.
bud to open, like you have
Lotus,
to
I
have
think of.
time. And
mm,
for those of us with responsive desire, that could look a million different ways, right? For me, it's like having some time alone and making sure I've had a full night of sleep and making sure I've
Mm,
fruits and vegetables, and that I feel good in my body. And when I'm relaxed, when I don't have stress about work, when I don't have timelines, when I don't have, logistics to consider, then my desire can really blossom.
Mhm.
And one of the first person to really bring this into the mainstream conversation is, of course, Dr. Emily Nagoski. Her new book just came out, and it is a fabulous reminder of these things and really understanding. And this is kind of the other part of it, and this is really from her newest book called Come Together, is really that like chasing desire, like I want to want it more, or where did my libido go, or like I don't have a
Mm.
libido anymore, or I used to want sex all the time and now I don't. That is also normal. And
The changing, the fluxes.
for sure. And also understanding that, and the way Dr. Nagoski would describe it is really that like desire is not the thing to chase, it's pleasure. Right. And I had
Yes.
this really felt sense of this morning. Like I understand this intellectually, and I have a fabulous partner who's also a sex therapist who
Ooh,
really we get to
hey.
explore like a lot of stuff together.
Mhm.
And I really had this experience of like missing him, right? We've been traveling together for 3 weeks. We have been together, but I miss the connection. It's not so much
Mm,
that like, oh, I'm horny, which is kind
mhm,
of
mhm,
again this common
mhm.
spontaneous response, but it's like, oh, I miss him. I want to feel erotically connected. I want
Mhm.
to feel our bodies together. And it's very different. The way my
Yes.
client described it when I explained this to her was that there's a lot of space between yes and no. So it's, I don't want to do this right now, but can we do it in an hour? Or I don't want to
Mm,
do this today because I got
mm.
this stuff on my calendar, but can we connect tomorrow? So really understanding the difference between the spontaneous and the responsive is so foundational. And also understanding that desire is not something that we need to chase. So that's number one and number two. And number three is really understanding that some of us need sex to feel emotionally connected, and some of us need that emotional connection to want sex, right? And so
Yes, totally.
and of
Yeah.
course, we're often attracted to people who are opposite, whether they're
Y-
spontaneous, responsive, or sex versus connection, right? And
Yeah.
and I see this play out in couples all the time, again,
Mhm.
regardless of age or
Mm.
gender or sexuality, this idea that one person wants to feel close and wants to get naked and play to do it, and the other person wants to feel close and have conversations and snuggle and
Yes.
want to walk and cook dinner together before they get to the sex part. Just that knowledge of those three things alone can
Mhm.
be so foundationally different, like can really
Yeah.
transform the foundation of a
Yeah.
relationship when we understand that A, nothing is wrong with us, and that
Yes.
B, our partner might be totally different, right?
I
And
was
so
just going to say, and that neither is right or wrong,
that's
Yeah.
right.
right? Like that,
Yes,
just because mine
exactly.
is this way doesn't mean yours has to be wrong for mine
That's
to
right.
exist, or the other way
Mhm.
around. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, I love this. Well, and I think too, what's really important with what you're saying, and just to re-highlight this, is one is bringing up that desire. It is going to change.
Yes.
Like
Mhm.
I know I hear so much and even for myself, I've absolutely done it. Just the judgments of comparing, this body that's had children, that's older,
Mhm.
that's whatever's going on for it, and these things that, and then, well, it's not as responsive. She's not, you know, wanting the spontaneous. I had a whole lot more spontaneous desire than now, and then judgments for myself for that, even of like, well, where did that go? And that sucks, and I want that, versus the acceptance and kind of just the relaxing into where we're at. And so I know so many of the issues come from just that acceptance, really,
Yeah.
like that radical acceptance. Change, it's cycles. We are cycles, friends.
And the cycles is so important, right? And I'm glad you mentioned that,
Hmm.
because I think about that a lot when I think about, when I started understanding my menstrual cycle. So I'm
Hmm.
43, still cycling normally, regularly, and
Yes.
changes are coming.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
it's like understanding that, like, and for example, this is the week, like I'm gonna get my period next week. Like this is the week where I just want to like Netflix and eat pizza. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to be
Yes.
sexual. And with
Yes.
the exception of like realizing like, oh, I do miss my person, right? So
Yes.
understanding that we're cyclical and that it's not like, okay, well,
Progesterone's
we're
tanking. There's things happening.
there's
Like
stuff
there's
happening.
other things happening in the background besides just the idea.
Yeah,
Like chemicals are happening, hormones are happening, a whole orchestra.
yeah.
And then the other thing then too, of loving love, that you had talked about desire, and that's one thing, and that's an energy for sure, but
Mhm.
then pleasure, and
Yes.
pleasure is And I think pleasure is easier or more tangible. It's more tangible for me in the sense that I use my senses as far as then from the pleasure of, right, what feels good, what sounds good, what tastes good, what,
Mhm.
so how do you talk about then that pleasure seeking piece then if it's not desire seeking? Could you share some of that part of it or that
Yeah,
journey?
yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up the pleasure because, again, harkening back to Dr. Emily Nagoski, pleasure is the measure, right? Are
Yes.
you
Ooh.
doing things with your body of your all using all your senses that delight you, right? And to that end, I would also add nourish you, right? Like,
Mhm.
I love that you
are
said
we,
that earlier. I'm going to stop you right there because it's such a great freaking word. If I can,
yeah,
nourishment. And you had even said that earlier when you were talking about that's where you started with the food and these women finding their path and that nourishment. And that is just on that deeper level. I just want to say that word again. And I love you're using it. What I'm finding that people are really, really seeking. That we know there's connection. We know that people are missing these different things, whether it was from COVID or life or whatever's. But this seeking that the masses are doing really, really, I think, is coming from this pleasure, from this really deep nourishment, acknowledgement of what do I need, and that feels good, and not just the need, but the thriving feels good. And we put pleasure sometimes, I think, in the thriving, uh, you know, part of our lives, that if we're not feeling thriving, that we don't get to have pleasure, I think. And so I think it's really important, this word nourishment, and I love that you're using it because it does feel very delicious and yummy, but it satisfies, I
that's
think,
right.
something deeper in our souls. Go ahead,
And
please.
That's a
Sorry.
and
great way.
well,
That's a great way
yeah,
to describe.
and I need to add the operative word we keep saying, all three of us, is I. I need this, I need that. So even though Andrea said one thing that during her period, thank you, during your periods, you need pizza and Netflix. There are females, males, trans, queer, whoever, that during that time, they want sex. They are turned on during menstruation.
For sure.
So that remind yourself that I is what's important, not what others are doing, but what your pleasure is, what your nourishment is. So
Just figuring that out sometime for the most like is the trick, right? Like
yeah,
Yeah,
it's just what do
yeah.
you want? What
right,
do
Yes,
you desire?
right,
Oh, I forgot to ask
yes.
myself. I've been so busy
right,
filling
Or
everyone else's desires.
I'm focused on everyone else's desires.
right.
Yes.
I don't know what I want, but I know what I need to do to be a
Mm,
good partner, to be a good
Mhm,
student, to be a good
mm,
daughter, to be a good
mhm,
mother.
mhm,
All of these shoulds that we put on
mhm.
ourselves, we so
mhm,
often take ourselves out of it. And I have some of the most like working with people one-on-one is awesome. I love doing it. Really beautiful transformations to be witnessed. And when I do a group work, because I also teach a lot of classes and workshops online and in person, getting people to, and I've done this with multiple groups of people and with individuals, to really say, like, I want you to write down a list of 10 things that you want. I don't care if
Yes.
it's a baby or a manicure, or you want to go to New Zealand, or you want to have salad for
Yes.
lunch today. Like,
mhm,
literally anything goes. Like, what do you want? Do you know how many people cannot
Yes.
figure out 10 things? Or
right,
if they have 10 things, like, I have to be very specific, 10 things for you. Don't tell me
Yes.
what your husband needs.
Yes.
Don't tell me what your kids need. Don't tell me you have to
Yes.
worry about the doctor's appointments.
What the whole
That is
group
all
wants
real.
to do. Yeah.
right,
No, 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 no.
That is real.
What
What
do
do
you
you want
want?
in this
All
moment?
by yourself.
Yes. And
mhm,
for that nourishment, right? And
Mm,
it's been so interesting to work. And the two examples I'm thinking of particular with groups of really high powered women, right? So,
mm,
kind of prototypical boss babes, like high earners, high functioning moms usually.
mhm,
And she's like, I don't have time for pleasure. I don't even have time to like wash my face in the morning. Right.
mhm,
And so I hear that as well,
yes.
in that it's multifold. I think one, we are socialized to martyr ourselves for literally everyone,
mhm,
Yes.
kids, parents'
women are
job.
conditioned for this.
Yeah, the conditioning is really strong. And I have my
Yes.
own version of that, even though I don't have kids. You know, there's this version of the good girlfriend or the good
Oh, for
wife
sure.
Right.
that is like,
Oh,
oh,
your
well,
other
I
type.
need to subsume, yeah, that archetype of
Yes.
like, I need to subsume my needs.
Yep.
And, you know, dating someone who is so wise and so feminist and so, you know, grounded in his own therapeutic wisdom and his own background in therapy of receiving and giving. It's like, what do you really want? I'm like,
Mm.
I really want to take a shower. And he's like, great.
Yes.
Like, but is that okay? Like, I don't want to play. I just want to take a shower. And he's like,
Yes.
go take a shower. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's what I mean. Like, it is my work too, is really like
Yes.
minding these ideas of like, what do I want right now? Like, you know what? I just want to take a shower. I actually don't want to play. Like, I'm tired. Let's just lay down. And
Yes.
getting people to articulate what they want, both in a, you know, everyday setting, right? Again, do you really want to have another baby and you're not sure if your partner's going to say yes? Like, it is
Yes.
important to own that.
Yes.
Even if
Yes.
the conversation doesn't go that
Mhm.
way, right?
Yes.
The things I work with with people on, you know, again, depending on where they're at, is with something called a yes, no, maybe list. Have
Mm.
you folks ever used one of
Yeah.
these?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's fun.
They are so
So
good.
I made my own, and for anyone that's not familiar, it's basically a list of mine is 2 pages of just all kinds of different sexual activities, right? Everything's from like anal play to like making out to wearing a strap on, whatever.
Yes.
And getting
Mm.
people to think about like, yes, definitely, I'm into that, or
Yes.
like,
Yes.
no, that's
I'm a
definitely
hard
not
no.
for me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or like maybe, right? And the maybe is
You can
super.
convince me.
Yeah, well, that's important, right? Because it's like,
Yep.
well, what is the maybe? Maybe
Yep.
I'd be into that if I took a shower first.
Yes.
Maybe I'd be
Yes.
into
That's
that
often, isn't it?
if we had a whole day
Right.
to play, right? Like, I don't really, I'll use a personal example, right? Like, anal play is great for me, and it's also not something I just like jump into, right? Like, we need
Right.
time
Correct.
to
You got
work
to
on.
talk about it. You don't just do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not just gonna jump into that. This is not a
Right.
quickie. We're gonna
Yes.
take some time.
Otherwise, it's not pleasurable for anybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing I included on my list, which I thus far haven't seen anywhere, is the element of fantasy.
Oh,
Because
the fantasy.
there are, and this goes back
Most
to the
erotic.
desire and the nourishment, right? Like, there are things that we want in our brains only, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
but
Yes.
whatever it is, right?
I love that you're saying this. Yes.
Yes.
It's so powerful. And so even if
Yes.
this is a popular one that a lot of people say is like, oh, I really want to have a threesome. Okay, great.
Yes.
Maybe that is not possible right now because of an illness or an injury, or maybe you just had a baby, or maybe that's just not within your relationship agreements, but it's still
Totally.
super hot to think about.
Yes.
Owning the fact that it's super hot to think about, and maybe it just lives in your brain. Maybe you watch erotica, or, you know, watch pornography or listen to erotica, audio or written erotica. Maybe you just keep it in your brain. Maybe you tell your partner or partners about it. I had this dream last night and it was super sexy, right?
Super sexy. Yes.
Never gonna come to fruition, even if it never happens in real life.
Yep.
Like, it is powerful to own your desires. And that in and of itself
Yeah.
can free us from some of the constraints, right? Like, of the good wife, the good partner, to like, yeah, like, I'm a mom, or I'm 60, or I'm queer. Like, yeah, I still want those things, right?
What
And
I
it's
think is super but that is powerful. Yes, the acknowledgement for self, but even and also then is there's some folks that I hear a lot of like they almost expect themselves to have to share things, like even before they've figured it out for themselves of like, oh, I can keep this to myself. Yes, please, actually.
Mhm,
That there
mhm,
are certain things that you want to keep for yourself, even from my part, even maybe from your partner. Just
sure.
because we've made agreements doesn't mean now we have nothing for ourselves. And so that also can be equally powerful, of you don't have to share everything. You can keep things to yourself as long as it's not hurting you, or you're not being distressed by it, or the other,
Yeah,
whatever's going on. That yeah, keep some things
yeah.
for yourself. That's hot
Yeah.
too.
And,
Yeah.
you know, yes, create relationship agreements, monogamy, non-monogamy,
Yes.
the millions of different versions of that in between that work for you and your
Yes.
people, right? If your agreement is monogamy, then yeah, probably we're not going to have a threesome. But if your agreement is that we're non-monogamous, okay, what does that look like, right? How
Yes.
do we create agreements
this.
that work for us right
Yes.
now in our
Yes.
lives. And again, that's going to change, right? If you've just had a baby, you're not maybe going to want to have the sex that you had a year ago. And that is normal.
Right.
If you just moved houses and are both, both you and your person or your people have new jobs and a new house and you're refurbishing the house or whatever, like
Yes.
maybe feel like having sex all the time. You're distracted by
Yes.
picking out the faucets and picking out the wallpaper and finding out how to work at your new job. Knowing that we go in cycles, right? Both our individual cycles and our relational cycles, but also just life cycles gives us the freedom to say, like, what do I want right now? Like, actually, babe, like, I am so tired this week because XYZ is happening. I miss you. Can we snuggle? Like that's all I need right now. And really having those conversations, I think really early on in relationship to get
Yes.
somebody on board, right? Like, hey, sometimes I don't want to have sex after a long day, right? And this was one of the agreements my partner and I agreed to early on in our relationship was if we don't often have sex at night. We sometimes do, and it's a bonus. But he and I are early birds. Like we are up at 5 or 6 in the morning. He goes up and goes running. I go to yoga, I make my tea, I journal, whatever. By 10 o'clock at night, like if we're falling into bed, like no. But if we can spend time in the afternoon or in the early evening,
Yes.
then we have the energy, right? So even just that like expectation of like, oh, we go to bed, we must have sex now, is I just remember feeling that in previous relationships of like, oh, we're in bed, like should we, shouldn't we? Like, I don't know, but without having the ability to talk about it. So now it's like, no, we go to bed, like we go to bed. Like maybe we read, maybe we snuggle, but like for the most part, we pass out within like 2 minutes. And without that conversation around it, I personally would still have that anxiety around like, does he want to have sex? Do I want to have sex? Like, should I have sex? Right? Like, no,
Yeah.
like, it's nighttime. Like, this is not our expectation of each other.
So, Andrea, you shared some wonderful topics, discussions, info for our YouTubers and our Kiss and Tell family. And thank you for being our first podcast guest of 2024. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you. And thank you. That's it for today. Unless you have something,
I
Sabrina.
do. We had a couple of things real quick too, Andrea. So, any programs or a book, event, something that you've got going on that you're really excited about that you want to share with our folks?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. So I teach
Yes.
free online monthly classes for everybody that are focused on mindful sex. So a more conscious, mindful, gentle approach to sexuality and how we might approach that. So I'm teaching this Saturday, so that's February 24th. It's a free online class, and
Ooh.
it's going to be focused on the erotic thread. How do we keep the sparkle in
Erotic.
between play sessions, right? It's not just like, hey, do you want to play now? It's actually like what we did on Saturday last week translates to Saturday this week, right? So it's kind of that connection point. I also do
Yes.
3 monthly gatherings for men. So I work a lot with men in my practice in order to help heal some of the wounds that toxic masculinity has put upon our men and get them in a safer space to talk about sexuality topics. And it's a powerful meetup. It's also a free online class. So those are both held monthly, and all the information is on my website, andreabertoli.com.
.com. Your Instagrams, any of your socials,
Yeah,
same?
so I'm Vibrant Wellness on Instagram, which harkens back to my food days, but is still
Yes.
very translatable. So Vibrant Wellness on
Yep.
Instagram. And on TikTok, I am Sex Coach Andrea.
Sex Coach Andrea. Thank you again so much, Andrea, truly for sharing your gifts, your
Thank
journey,
you.
and just what you've come to learn and the wonderful work that you're doing that we all need, and just having space for that. So I am deeply grateful for the
Thank
work
you
that
so
you're doing
much.
in the world.
Yes, thank you.
For we all needing it. And again, keep on sharing your wisdom. We appreciate all of you that are joining in this conversation with us, kissing and telling. And we appreciate you, Andrea, for kissing and telling us about it. And until next month, we'll have Asha Sims with us. Thank you again, Andrea. You're amazing. And we'll see you all later.
Thank you.